Odd John by Olaf Stapledon. So this book was copyright 1935, and I have a Berkeley reprint here, a vintage paperback from the 60s, and we've got some really interesting artwork. And if you'd like, you could pause and read the back. On the front, we have a quote from Damon Knight that says, "An SF classic, which is the first Superman story and still by odds the best." Now, as many of you know, I've been doing this series called The Masterpieces of Science Fiction, reading through 140 books that Easton Press put together. This is episode 62, so I'm getting very close to the midway point of the series, and I'll probably do a special video for that. But this is one of I think I have 5 actual Easton Press versions. Most of the copies of these books that are on this list, I have paperbacks or hardbacks or whatever the case may be. But I actually have an Easton Press of this one. And I'm sure most of you have seen these out in the wild. They're beautiful, beautiful books, leather bound, gold edges on the pages. You got a ribbon bookmark. These books oftentimes have some interesting artwork. So this is kind of the cover illustration, and then there's a few other illustrations throughout. And this book also has an introduction by Alfred Bester that was written in 1987. And basically Bester just kind of talks about how he randomly kind of discovered Olaf and some of his books in the library when he was a kid and played some influence on Bester's writing. And you also, with a lot of these, if you find them the way they were published, you get a collector's card. Sometimes if you buy these on the secondary market, people have lost these collector's cards or whatnot, but I happen to have the whole thing. So, they're very nice, well-made books, but I'm not going to collect all 140 of them. They take up a lot of space. It would be very expensive. But most people probably know Olaf from his book Star Maker. This could be probably one of his most popular science fiction books, but he's written a few others. And I've tried to read Star Maker a few times and kind of struggled with it. It's a different kind of book. It seems to almost be a blend of nonfiction and fiction. And it's written in his prose can be a little academic or a little dry. And so I thought I'd give Odd John a try first. This book was actually written before Star Maker. And what this book is about, it's kind of the idea is that there's the next evolution of the human race. So we're Homo sapiens. They come up with this name for him called Homo superior. And Odd John is kind of the focus character in this novel, but he ends up finding other people like him in the world, and they kind of have this band of superhumans that kind of go through life trying to figure out their way and what their part of in humanity is. So in the very beginning of the book, you get a excerpt from basically the narrator of this book. And so it's basically a man who knew Odd John when he was young and knew his family, and he decided to write a biography about John's life because he feels like he's the closest person to John, the best person to be able to write an autobiography about this interesting person's life. And although he admits that his knowledge is incomplete of everything that John went through, he's probably the best suited to write this biography about him. And in the very beginning of the book, you get a lot of, on the first page basically, our narrator gives away a lot of the major events that happen in John's life, all the way up to his death. So some of the things that are going to happen right away. He's going to die with a band of these superhumans on some island as these nations kind of decide that they need to do something about these superhumans. And so with the plot given away, it's basically just the retelling and the details of John's life. And John, he was kind of born and really slow to develop. It's almost like he had to learn how to breathe. He had to learn how to do everything that we take it for granted that our bodies just kind of run on autopilot. But once he masters these functions of his body, he can control every part of his body and his mind. And we get to the point where John has telepathic powers. He can move things that normal people can't. He has all these super abilities. But this is really a book that has to do a lot with philosophy and psychology and the inner workings of what's going through John's head as he grows up and tries to figure out how he fits into society. It's a very interesting book. The prose can, like I said, I think Stapledon in most of his books, it can be a little dry and academic, but the ideas, this isn't really a pulpy style book for something that was written in the 30s. I believe Olaf was way ahead of his time. He was very influential on many science fiction writers that were to come after him. And he was doing some really deep thought experiments through this book and really got into a lot of philosophical ideas, and it was very intriguing the whole way through. Now, John, he is almost amoral, and some of the ethics that come up in this book, there's some kind of horrific things that happen throughout here. Like, if someone stands in John's way for what he envisions this next evolutionary stage of humanity that he's part of, if someone stands in the way of that, they need to go. It's just a fact. There's no morals that come into play here with John, the way he thinks and the way he acts. It's just something that needs to be done. And so you get a lot of ethical quandaries in a way that get hashed out in this book. And you don't have to agree with all of them. There's some bad things that happen in this book, but if you take it as this thought experiment and these ideas that Olaf is throwing out in here, it's very enjoyable. I'm going to give this book 4 stars. I had a lot of fun reading it. It read pretty fast. It's read around 200 pages, just under 200 pages. And it was easy to follow, easy to understand. Like I said, it really got into some deep philosophical thinking. And I really can't wait to read Star Maker now. I don't know exactly when I'll get to it. But I think this was a good kind of prep course for me before I try to dive back into Star Maker. So if you happen to see this book come along and you want to read something from the 30s that was, Olaf was doing something completely different than most anything else I read from this era. And I think he did a really good job with it. So I recommend this one, especially if you're kind of like a student of science fiction, like I try to think of myself as. I think there's a lot of insight. You'll see a lot of influence that he gave other authors that were to come. So next up, I'm reading The Alteration by Kingsley Amis. So just look for that review coming out next. And once again, thanks for watching.